Hello, my name is Martin Tully and I'm a sales engineer here at Portnox. And today what I'd like to do is provide you with a demonstration of our simple cloud native network access control platform called Portnox Clear, or sometimes also referenced as Portnox Cloud. So as you can see on my screen, I have our dashboard up and running. The other things that we're going to do during this time is I'm going to show you how you can sign up for the free trial, uh, show you also our YouTube channel where you can reference out some videos, as well as sort of how the authentication methods work in case you're not familiar with that at all. So let's start with what does Portnox do in the background in terms of network access controlling? What is that? So if we take a look at our diagram here, what we have are what we call our supplicants, right? So these are devices that want to get onto your corporate network. So these could be obviously workstations, they could be phones that are tied into a workstation, they could be printers, right? They could be iPads or phones, mobile phones. They could be security cameras, right? IoT devices basically is what we're looking at there. And what Portnox does in our Radius server, which is probably the biggest element that or hurdle that customers might have, because obviously that would be like an on-premise component for a lot of other network access control vendors, is that you have to stand up that server, provide it resources, maybe manpower, obviously to update it and things like that. In our case, right, this is all in the cloud. You do not need to stand up a server for that, and you don't need to waste other valuable teams members updating this because we will take care of all that for you. So again, going back to the diagram, what you see here is the supplicant. So this, think of it as a user or somebody that wants to get into, let's say, a nightclub, okay? And then you have your authenticator. So your authenticator could be your switch or an access point on your network, right? And so the user's asking, saying, hey, I want to get into this area here, right? I want to get into the club, which would be basically your network. The authenticators will basically send that request to our Radius server. Our Radius server will then ask you for some sort of credentials. So whether that might be username and password, or if you use our certificates, certificate-based authentication, or maybe even MAC address bypass, right? So if you think about that, maybe we're going to ask you for your name, right? If this was a bouncer, let's say, or maybe they'll ask you for an ID, right? Like a license that says that this is you, right? In terms of like that would be like a certificate-based authentication, or maybe you're on a whitelist, right? So MAC address bypass, where it says, hey, this is so and so. We're expecting you to come through. Go ahead and go in. Once that request to enter the club or into your network comes to our Radius server, then we make a determination on what we're going to do. So you provide us with your name or the passphrase to get in, or you provide us with the license, and now we're going to let you in. But then we can make some determinations, right? So when you get into the network, or let's say you got into the club, we can either one, maybe just put you into general admission, think about as that as like a default VLAN, or maybe you have special access. Maybe you need to go to the roped off area to the right or to the left, and think about that as dynamic VLANs, right? We're going to put you into a VLAN that you belong to. So we make some determinations from within there. And in terms of MAC address bypassing, even though you might be on that whitelist, we might actually ask you for certain things. We're going to look for certain criteria that's on you. Maybe what kind of hat you're going to be wearing, what kind of shoes are you wearing, right? Those are things that we ask once you're in the club, and we sort of see what those aspects are. To make sure that that's you and nothing changes during your time inside the club, right? So think about max spoofing in that particular case is what we're doing. So how do I get and how do I sign up for a tenant, right? So to sign up for a tenant, you can see here the URL that I went to, which is portnox.com free trial. And you can see here the get started piece. So we basically ask you for an email address and really organization name. Those are the two big pieces. Once you provide that information, one of the big things here is the data protection. If there is no restrictions or where you need to keep the data, you can basically say international geo redundancy. If there are restrictions, or let's say you want to keep all that data in Europe, then you basically make a selection here and hit submit. Or if there are requirements to keep it inside the United States, again, you would just select that and hit submit. Once you hit submit, just basically wait a few minutes, and then the user at this email address would get an email letting them know that the tenant is ready. They would click on it, activate the tenant, and they would land here in our dashboard, right? So this is the dashboard that every user basically lands on for the first time. And this is where they'll begin that journey. So one of the first things we need to do is create that radius server, right? We need to create this piece here of the puzzle. And to do that in Portnox, you basically go here under settings. And once you're in settings, you go under clear radius service. And what you see here is that we've already deployed both of our radius services. So we have one in the US and we have one in Europe and Asia. So Portnox has all the environments inside Azure, right? So we have two different radius services set up here. If you remember in the sign up, we basically specified where we wanted that data. In your particular case, as a new instance that gets stood up, you'll have a link similar to this one. It'll say create a radius service. You'll say where, and once you click on it, give it a minute or so, what you'll have is all the information really that you need in order to put into, right, these authenticators, right? So the authenticator being that switch or that access point. What they're going to need is a radius IP. Where do I need to send that authentication to, right? And in here specifically, we have custom authentication ports and accounting ports for the account, as well as a shared secret, right? So that's what we provide, and that is the information you need to put in to this specific piece here, the authenticators. From there, we can make some determinations about how we are going to authenticate that device, right? So again, if we go back to our scenario here, we talked about, one, maybe you'd be showing us like a license, right? Saying this is me, right? That would be like a certificate-based authentication. Or maybe you have a passcode, and that would be username and password authentication. In this particular case, we have our authentication repositories over here to the left-hand side. When you click on that, what you see here is that we support integrations with OpenLDAP, on-prem Active Directory, right? As you can see here. If you are going to use an on-prem Active Directory, then we do need to download what we call is a AD broker. That broker will create a secure and encrypted TLS tunnel back to Portnox so that we can grab group information from your local Active Directory. If this is a cloud authentication, so whether it's Google, whether it's Azure or Okta, then it's really simple. I'll use Azure here as my example. Now, really all we need is your tenant ID, and then we'll walk you detailed step by step on the instructions that we're going to need. Basically, we'll show you pop-ups. We need read information in order to be able to grab group information from your Azure Active Directory. Same thing for Okta, right? So these are all cloud-based authentication repositories that we can link up with. Very simple and very easy, right? And this is also not only going to allow us to authenticate users via username and password, but when we talk about where we need to put those users once they enter the club, this is going to allow us to be able to see those users, let's say the accounting team, and make sure that they get put into the correct VLAN. The other way to authenticate devices would be with a certificate-based authentication. So one of the nice things about Portnox is that we will provide you with a trusted root certificate. When you think about the licensing in Portnox, right, we have a Radius as a service license, and we have our full-blown ZTNA. Of course, this will be provided with our ZTNA license. If you are looking at just Radius as a service, then this is a small add-on that would be put onto the price of a Radius as a service license. But basically what we do is we provide you with a trusted root certificate. So you don't have to deploy your PKI server. Obviously, trusted root certificate is a much more secure way than username and password. Most of the customers that I've talked to are going this direction. One, because there's no user interaction, and B, again, it's just a much more secure way to authenticate devices. If you have your own PKI server, we can definitely utilize that. You can upload your certificate from within here, and we can make it trusted on our side. Then we also give you the ability to create skep URLs, right? So if once you deploy, once you say, hey, I'm going to do certificate-based authentication, then what you can do is you can enable integration for skep services, and we will provide you with the skep URL. If it's Microsoft Intune, we can provide you with the skep URL for Microsoft Intune. And really, this would be for any type of MDM solution. So whether it might be Jamf or it's Kanji, we're able to provide that SCEP URL for those MDM solutions, and then from there you can also deploy Wi-Fi profiles and other settings that you need to deploy out to the end user. Once we have sort of the way we're going to authenticate our users and have that all set up, then the next thing is really creating groups and policies, right? So in terms of groups here, what you'll see here is that, there's multiple groups that we have set up. And these, again, these are examples of our groups and how you can utilize groups inside Portnox, right? So whether, we're looking at, IP phones or the IT team or customer success, sales and marketing, right? Remote vendors that are coming in, the accounting group, right? So again, you can see here the way we're utilizing these groups. So whether it's departmental, whether it's by users, whether it's by location, you can create these different groups in Portnox. And so one of the ones that I'm going to pick on is I'm going to pick on the accounting group. The other thing that you can see here is that there's the ability to sort of rearrange this very easily. If I want to move the accounting group up, I could, right, move that up one. So I can definitely do that from within here. But let's take a look at that accounting group. So when I click on the accounting group, one of the first things that you see here on the left-hand side is I have three options. I have settings, I have members, and I have policies, right? So I've created my Portnox group. Now in members, based off the authentication repositories I set up previously, I can now define who is a member of this accounting group. Well, if I use my Azure Active Directory, what I can do, again, as I stated, right, we're going to be pulling group information from within here. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to grab the accounts payable team and the accounting team, and they are now part of this Portnox accounting group, right? So these users here are now part of this Portnox accounting group, and now I can define how they can access my network, right? What can they do once they get into the club, right? How can they get in there? So if you come down here, we take a look. The access layers that we support are wireless, wired, and VPN, right, access. So if we look at wireless, right, if these users here have a SSID specific to them, then I can just put the accounting SSID. This is how they're going to, this is the SSID that's configured for 802.1x. And I'm going to say that they can authenticate with credentials or even a certificate. And I'm going to say that they can authenticate with an agent or agent list. So one thing I didn't mention earlier in terms of certificate-based authentication, with our ZTNA license, you also have the ability to deploy our what we call is the Portnox agent or agent P. Agent P has the capabilities to distribute out a certificate to those endpoints, as well as provide risk assessment and remediation to those devices. So it's a really nice add-on feature to, again, to if you really want that full ZTNA layer of security for your network. So here we have agent list. I said what SSID they're going to connect to. Currently, I'm not going to allow them to connect via wired, right? But again, if this was a case that I wanted to, I just move that slider over and then they can connect to any port, again, that is enabled for 802.1x. So we can definitely do that from within here. They do have access to connect via VPN because they're in hybrid mode, right? So sometimes they work from home and they want to connect through VPN, so they can do that from within here. You can see here, validate risk score for all managed devices. This is, again, that benefit that the agent provides, because even though the end user is working from home and they're connecting via VPN back to my network, I can take a look at the device itself and provide a risk score to see, make sure that their antivirus is still running, their firewall is still running. Maybe they didn't lend their laptop off to one of their kids and maybe they accidentally turned off the firewall or something to that effect. Again, the agent can take a look at those attributes on those, depending on the OS, and provide you with a risk score based off of however you set that up, which we'll talk about here in policies in a second. So now we have our user, right? They connected to this account SSID. They provided the correct credentials or the certificate. Then we can take it one step further, right? And we can apply a policy to this accounting group. In this particular case, we have multiple policies. We have an access control policy. What's going to happen once that user authenticates properly? Then we have a risk assessment policy. This would be part of the agent. Or if you have Microsoft Intune, again, if you wanted to do the Microsoft Intune integration for risk assessment, that would require that ZTNA license. Remediation, that would be also the agent. And if you wanted to, you will also have a TACX, which will talk on very briefly, but this is where you could put a TACX Plus policy in. But in this particular case, for this accounting group that we selected, they have this accounting access default policy. So let's take a look at that policy. Let's see what it says. So when I click on policies, you can see here on the left-hand side, I have the same policies that we saw on the previous screen. We have an access control policy. We have a risk assessment policy, a remediation, and that TACX policy as well. We are currently in the access control policy. And this is the policy that group got assigned. I'm sorry, they got assigned this one here, the accounting access default. So let's take a look at that. So here is the access control policy. You can see again, network type, wireless, wired, and VPN, which were those same access layers that we saw previously. And so what we're saying is, hey, when you give us a correct passphrase or show us your correct credentials, right, your license that says that you can come in to the club, this is where we're going to make that determination on where we're going to put that user, right? If we did not have a special section, right, for this accounting team, then we can put them in the default VLAN. In this particular case, the accounting group gets put into the VLAN accounting, right? So we already have a VLAN set up on our network called accounting. We're just telling that we're just telling them that when that group successfully authenticates, that this is where they need to go. They need to go to the accounting VLAN. So we're going to place them there. So dynamic VLAN placement. If we do not have any VLAN set up, more of a simple type network, then what we'll do is we'll just drop them off into that default VLAN. Again, if we're going back to that club analogy, maybe just general admission, you're allowed onto the floor. And that would also go for wired as well, right? So wireless wired VPN. Again, this is upon successful authentication. If you don't have the correct credentials or ID, or you're not on that whitelist, right, then authentication violation, very simple. We can deny access to that user, or we can maybe put them in a quarantine until we can gather more information. Risk policy violation, again, this would be dependent on that risk assessment here. Because of risk policy violation, again, that would also determine whether or not you have the agent or you're using Intune. It could be that maybe you need some Windows updates, your antivirus is out of date, or you're missing some definitions. Instead of denying you access, right, maybe we'll quarantine you into an internet-only access so that you can go grab those updates and then you can successfully authenticate and be able to get onto the network. And that takes us to risk assessment. So risk assessment, again, this would be dependent on the agent or agent list. If we take a look at the agent can take a look at the specific attributes based off operating system. So whether it's Android, right, or iOS, right, or Mac, or Linux, right, and of course Windows. These are all the attributes that the agent can take a look at, right? Where is that device connecting from? If you remember a little bit on the dashboard that we saw some blue dots on a map. That's where the agents tell me these devices are connecting from, right? So you can put in a forbidden geolocation, maybe a forbidden application or required application, right? Maybe a forbidden application might be something like an IP scanner, right? Or maybe some sort of download application, right? Or rootkit or whatever it might be that forbidden application, whatever that might look like on your end. Open ports, right? Windows registry. Do they have administrator privileges? What are forbidden peripheral devices, right? You think about mass storage devices being plugged into the laptop. We don't want that, right? We don't want them to go take data off of our network. Antivirus definitions, right? And what you can see here is there's a number next to all these, right? And under antivirus, we have set it to 100. And if I take a look at my bar here, risk-oriented actions, What I'm seeing here is an alert is basically 70 to 100. So anywhere from 0 to 69, you can basically the device will be allowed 70 to 100. It's going to generate an alert which will be sent to the administrator via email. With our ZTNA license, if you have a SIM solution like Splunk, Rapid7, really we integrate with any type of SIM solution, then we can send it to a SIM as well, right? So that's not a problem. Or you can move the slider down and say, hey, you know what, 90 to 100, go ahead and block it. But then again, then we would basically use our access control policies to determine what we're going to do with that device. Agentless, what you'll see here is a pattern. And so what we're doing here is we're referencing out Intune and we're asking Intune based off the criteria that you set up in Intune, whether or not the device is compliant or not. And then under remediation, this would be the agent only. The agent has the ability in Windows to run these actions, restart that antivirus, restart a firewall, disconnect a USB, maybe remove an application. So you can see here the actions that it can do. For Mac, it can do these specific actions here. And then as devices start to authenticate onto the network, they will basically land here. All right. And here we have our device view. So under devices, you can see the account that got authenticated, what group they got put into the device, what is their risk score, right? When was the last time they connected? Do they have an agent, right? And so that's what we're seeing here. Again, you get a lot of information very quickly. If we take a look at one device here, this is a Jeremy Morrill is his account, right? He got put into the specific Austin, Texas group. We can see what kind of device he has, what's his risk score, uh, if he has an agent or not. In this particular case, he does not have an agent. And again, you can see here the location. When was the last time he actually connected to the network, and how did he authenticate to my network? Will he authenticated via certificate? I can see again the Portnox, what network he connected to with like SSID. The network access IP, right? That would be the IP that he authenticated here. The authenticator's IP address is what you're seeing there. Other devices that you see here, again, some of these are running the agent. So you can see here some of the risk scores, right? These are in 100, and you can see why they're in that specific risk score, right? This one's not Intune compliant, and you can see what policy was assigned to the specific device and why they're getting that specific number. Let's take a look at this specific device here. This is Mike Marvin. Mike Marvin is in the default group. He does have an agent installed, right? I can see again where he's connecting from. I can see the last time that the agent reported in. This is the last time the agent reported in. The last time he actually connected was almost a year ago because he works from home in another location, not here in Texas. And so even though he hasn't connected, the agent is still reporting back and let me know what is the risk score of that device that he's connecting from so we can gather all that information. And then real quickly, what you can see here is some of the information that the agent gathered, right, intel from that specific device. Again, even though it's not connected to the network, the agent is reporting back what kind of security products, applications, right, hot fixes that are installed, certificates on that device, services that are running, peripheral devices that are connected, open ports on there, what kind of browsers. So again, the agent providing with a lot of information from that device, which obviously it uses right when you create that policy and have it to take a look at those specific attributes. Other devices that I want to sort of point out here, one is this media player. So this media player, we talked about MAC address bypass and that whitelist, right? We're going to let you on. So this is a MAC-based network authentication, as you can see here, right? We can see the MAC address, right? We can see the MAC vendor. And so these are the attributes that we basically picked up, right? So if you think about my analogy of going into the club and you're on that whitelist, but even though you got in where we take a look at what kind of shoes you're wearing, right? Maybe what kind of color shirt that you have, what color hair, things like that. And these are the device details, right? And what this allows us to do, right, in this profiling that we're doing on that device, and we do this via via various types of methods, whether it's like DHCP gleaming with Cisco devices, or we have a proxy that can go in there and send us out the DHCP request with like a DHCP forwarder as well, right? So we actually have a container that can do that, so we can profile those devices that are coming on board, so we can get more information about that specific device. And that's what you're seeing here under device details. You know, what is our confidence level that this is a media player, that this is NVIDIA? So you were gathering all this intel about this Mac-based account. This is going to allow us to, when we create these Mac-based accounts, is be able to enable what we call as IoT device trust. This is something that we've been working on since the last quarter of 2022 and before that actually. And this actual piece here got implemented in 2023, in June of 2023. Again, this required no downtime, right, for the end user. We did this all in the back end. So again, you don't have to call anybody in the middle of the night to come do the updates. We took care of all this for you, and we enabled this feature automatically for all our clients, right? So you have the ability to do that, enable IoT device trust. But again, if this was let's say these were HP printers, um, right? I can come in here and I can say add a Mac vendor. Let's say it was Hewlett Packard, right? And these is all the Mac prefixes that we know about. I hit save. Again, now I have all my Mac prefixes here. Not only am I going to make sure that we're going to do some fingerprinting on them, but we're also going to put them in a group and maybe provide and give them a specific, uh, put them in a specific VLAN once they get put in, because I'll put them in this printer test group. That printer test group has a policy assigned to them called uh, that puts them into the printer VLAN. The other view that you have here is network view. So this is more looking at it from the authenticator, right, from the access point or from the switch itself. And that's what we're seeing here. So these would be access points that we have. And you can see how many devices are connected to it, right, from within here. And these are devices that are connected. And then from there, you get the same information that we saw previously under accounts. You have the ability to do access control mode. So you can do enforcement or monitoring. So this was a big deployment, right? You could put this maybe in monitoring mode for a bit. Make sure we get all the kinks out, make sure that everything is working correctly, and then we can start enforcing that access control. This is very nice because you can rename this, so you can manage sites, manage the NASs, and put them in different locations in case you have a very complex environment. And then we'll go to alerts. So alerts basically has everything that's going on in terms of successful authentication, not successful authentications. This is where we would see that from within here. Again, you can see here, this was an authentication success for a printer. It did successfully authenticate via Mac-based authentication and has connected to the access layers. If this was something I wanted to get an alert from, again, I could send this alert to the administrators, or I can send it to my SIM solution if I wanted to as well, right? So I have those options here. So again, anything that's transpiring, that whether there's successful authentication or not successful authentications, obviously I wouldn't want to get an alert for a authentication success, but I would want to get alert maybe for any type of anything that's high in this particular case. So if we took a look at, for instance, this is a device that reached a block level. So this is using the agent. You can see here the forbidden peripheral device was a storage device that got plugged in, another block level devices, right? Admin credentials expiring. Let's see, what else do we have here? More block levels. Here's a device that was not Intune compliant, an access attempt denied due to wrong credentials. So you can see all of that from within here. Again, you can send that via notification. Other things that we do provide is the ability to do self-onboarding. So this is great for BYOD devices. We provide you with the URL here. You would basically send that user to this URL. Then they would authenticate based off the authentication repositories that you set up, that we set up previously here in the demonstration. They would authenticate. Then what they'll do is be able to download a profile so they can get onto the corporate network. There is the ability to do a captive portal, so you could do guest network access. Again, this would depend on the wireless vendor, but like if you have Meraki per se, right, you could definitely do a captive portal and you can do a sponsored guest from within here. We do provide you with reporting, so a daily report and a compliance report. You'll also have that. Under integration services, we do integrate with Okta. So this piece here, this integration with Okta, basically what it does is you can do some risk assessment on applications that users are clicking. So when you click on your Okta environment and you have your applications, you click on it. We basically make sure that that device is not in a risk factor. Again, that would be with the agent, and allow it to get onto the network or access that application. This is where also you set up that Intune integration if you want to do Intune compliance status, and of course your SIM integration. So again, you can see here the protocols that we support, right, and the communications that we set up support for a SIM solution. Real quick, other things that we do provide under troubleshooting, activity log, anything that's happening inside the tenant, you'll be able to see that from within here. AAA logs, this is that raw data that's coming in through that we're capturing in as devices are authenticating from the network. This is what you would see here. And then of course we have our help section, a lot of documentation in terms of how to set up. These are basically quick guides. Some of these are a little bit outdated, and so some of the screenshots that you might see in here, we are working to get these updated to the newer screenshots, and some of the vendors obviously that have changed or updated their GUI, so we're working on that. Just because you don't see a vendor here doesn't mean we don't support it. We are vendor agnostic. As long as they support 802.1x, we are good to go. So again, you can see all of that from within here, all these quick start guides. Probably one of the big ones here is security architecture and principles. So what happens on the back end with all the data and everything that we and how we function in the back end. This is something that we can definitely provide to the customers for you without any problems. We are SOC 2, so you'll be able to see that from within here when you open up the security principles PDF. Again, this is something that we'd be more than happy to share with you. But you can see here that we are a SOC 2 fully certified and compliant with security principles, security, availability, processing integrity, confidentiality, and privacy. There is also with our ZTNA license an API reference, so you can also take a look at the API reference from within here. So complete solution in terms of network access control. Again, the big thing here is that it is in the cloud. So that's a big win right there. We talked about how to sign up. Again, if you wanted to sign up, you can definitely reach out and we can send you the URL to sign up for this. This is the Portnox website. So there's a lot of good information here in terms of capabilities, initiatives, integrations that we have. Definitely we're in LinkedIn as well, so definitely follow us there to get a lot more information in terms of webinars that we're doing. We also have a YouTube channel, so if you want to see some of our older webinars, IT security, had a video here on leveraging Agent P for risk assessment, getting started, POC. So again, a lot of different videos that you can take advantage of here. So that's a demonstration. I look forward to maybe doing a POC with somebody here and that's listening. And just thank you and have a great day.